Hi, I'm Carl, and in this video we're going to go through questions 1 to 6 of the blue booklet. So this is a question about blood pressure and how different diets can affect their blood pressure. This is useful to have beside you because there's a useful graph that I haven't copied out here. So have a look at that as we go through. Question 1 says, which one of the following is likely to be the best estimate of the systolic pressure of a high normal person on a combination diet? Okay, so we can see here that there is, with the black bar in group 2, a decrease of around 6 millimeters of mercury for this particular group on this diet. So question 1, we just need to take away the value that we've got from our graph from the value that we're given for the initial. So systolic blood pressure is going to be 130 for that group initially on average. And then we're going to take off the 6 we get from the graph. And that gives us an answer of 124. The best estimate then that's closest to this is going to be A, which is 125. So the answer for number 1 is going to be A. If we look at number 2 then, it says, of the following, systolic blood pressure is likely to increase most for who? So this graph shows us a decrease in blood pressure going from a normal diet onto these specific diets. So if we took them from this specific diet back onto a normal diet, we'd expect the blood pressure to go back up again. Who has the greatest increase? Well, from the graph we can see who has the greatest decrease and then work backwards from there. We can see someone who has mild hypertension, or in group 3, has the greatest decrease in systolic blood pressure. So moving from a combination diet, if you are a mild hypertensive person, back onto a normal diet would cause the greatest increase. So in this case, that gives us an answer for B. 3 says, which one of the following is likely to be the best estimate for diastolic pressure of a mild hypertensive person on fruit and vegetable diet? So this is quite similar to question 1, but the difference here is that we're not given any data that would tell us what the decrease would be for a mild hypertensive person on a fruit and vegetable diet. We're only told what it would be on a combination diet. So to work out the effect of a fruit and vegetable diet relative to a combination diet, let's compare groups 1 and 2. We can see that, and we're just looking at the white bars for the diastolic pressures here, that the effect of reducing blood pressure is about half for the fruit and vegetable diet as for the combination diet. It goes down by about half as much. So we can assume the same is true for group 3 then. If we put them on a fruit and vegetable diet instead of a combination diet, the difference in diastolic pressure would be about half. So we can see from the graph here, if we look at group 3, the white bar goes up to around 6 millimeters of mercury for a combination diet. And if a fruit and vegetable diet is half as effective, we can assume that it would go down by about 3 millimeters of mercury. And then it's just answering this like in question 1. We know the initial diastolic blood pressure for that group is going to be 95. And when I take off our 3, then we get an answer of 92. And in this case, that gives us an answer of B. Question 4 then says, of the following, diastolic blood pressure is likely to increase most for who? So this one I think is easiest if we just go through the different options. It's quite similar to number 2, so it's worth just thinking about how moving someone from one diet to another might affect their blood pressure. So A says a mild hypertensive person on a combination diet changed to a fruit and vegetable diet. So obviously both are going to be good for blood pressure, but a fruit and vegetable diet is going to reduce the blood pressure by slightly less than a combination diet. And a mild hypertensive person, and we can see this from the graph for group 3, has the greatest benefit from this particular diet. And so if the greatest change is going to occur in the mild hypertensive group, then moving them from a combination diet to a fruit and vegetable diet is going to increase their blood pressure. So this is a viable answer here. But let's rule out the other 3. It says, for number B, a mild hypertensive person on a fruit and vegetable diet changed to a combination diet. So this is the opposite of the first one, and we'd expect to have a decrease as opposed to an increase in diastolic blood pressure here. C says, C and D both talk about people with normal blood pressure, and we can see, as I said from the graph, that people with high normal blood pressure show less of a change in their blood pressure when they change diets. And so we know now that the answer for this one is definitely going to be A. So there's some more information that's added on here, which I've simplified into this graph because I think it makes it a little bit easier to sort of understand what's going on. This information really just describes how blood pressure is measured and what systolic and diastolic is defined as. 5 says the pulse sound disappears mainly when. Okay, so I've drawn on here that the pulse becomes inaudible at the diastolic point. You can hear a pulse sound because there's some arterial occlusion, and we're told that as the pressure declines, the pulse can become audible, but as the cuff pressure further decreases, the pulse becomes less pronounced and eventually disappears, and this is because the pressure on the artery, the occlusion of the artery, gradually decreases. So the answer for this one is going to be D, because the arterial occlusion ceases altogether, and so the pulse sound disappears at the diastolic point. So the answer for number 5 is going to be D. And then number 6, it says, suppose the cuff pressure was about 140 millimeters of mercury for a typical mild hypertensive person on a normal diet. The pulse would be what? Okay, so for this one, let's look at the numbers that were given. I've drawn in 150 and 95 because those are the systolic and diastolic pressures for someone in that group on a normal diet. So the cuff pressure is going to be about 140, which we can say is around here on the graph. So we know it's going to be between the systolic and diastolic pressure. So if it's audible at this point and then becomes inaudible at this point, this whole region here is going to be audible. So that means we can rule out C and D. So is it only going to be heard once, or is it going to be heard throughout the cardiac cycle? Well, the pulse is heard or is produced due to ventricular contraction, and that only happens once per cardiac cycle, meaning that the answer for this one is going to be B. It's going to be heard once because it's within this audible range, and it will only occur once because it's only due to ventricular contraction, which happens each cardiac cycle. So the answer for this one is going to be B. Okay, so that was questions 1 to 6 of the blue booklet. I hope that helped. Thanks for watching.